Welcome, young adventurers. Dylan here. And on today's podcast, I have Forbes contributor Charlie Fink. He is the author of Remote Collaborations and Virtual Conferences, The Future of Work, 2020. And also he was the EVP and COO and VR pioneer of Virtual World Entertainment. Previously, he was the VP of Disney Featured Animation Story Development, and he teaches XR at Chapman University. And I'm super excited to bring him on. And if you're watching this live, feel free to ask questions or comments you have for Charlie. We're going to go deep on the topics of XR technology, VR, Oculus, the new augmented reality they have coming up, and many more things. So please, without any further ado, I'd like to welcome my friend, Charlie Fink.
Thanks, Dylan. Thanks for inviting me on the show.
Hey, brother. Pleasure to have you. I'm excited to talk to you about all things XR.
That's what I do.
Yeah, I know for sure. I've seen you in several different circles. I think we were on a panel once, but yeah, it's nice to be able to have a direct line of contact with you. How did you get started in the world of XR technology? What was the genesis of this?
I was in the process of leaving Disney, and Roy Disney suggested, he said, my son Tim is looking at buying a video game company. You and Tim ought to work together. And that's exactly what ended up happening. Tim bought a company called Virtual World Entertainment, which had created successful role-playing games, BattleTech and Shadowrun. They also had a simulation center where they had used hacked Apple computers and pinball game cabinets to create kind of fake flight simulators. But instead of putting you into the sky where you're going 600 miles an hour, and it's very hard to find other people, they put you like in a mining canal of Mars in an ore carrying hovercraft, and you race other hovercraft, or you're piloting a giant mech and you're fighting against other mechs. So you were networked together with other people who are, adjacent to you in their own pods or simulators.
Yep.
And then you see them and interact with them out the windshield of your vehicle, because of course, back in 1993, there were no head-mounted displays. There was a prototypical one that everyone talks about called Dactyl Nightmare from Virtuality, which was a one-person simulation. It was so bad that everybody using it got sick, and it cost like $60,000. So it wasn't really, some people tried to make a business out of it, selling it at $1 a minute in malls, but it couldn't really scale. And we had the same problem trying to roll out the simulation centers, which we rolled out over 30 locations on 4 continents in 3 years, which is incredibly fast, but not fast enough to keep up with the evolution of technology.
I always feel like virtual reality is like you're building a train in the desert, or building a town in the desert, saying the trains are coming. You always feel like it's almost good enough to be mainstream, and it's so cool, but you just got to go through so much effort. So
I left in the beginning of 1996 to go to America Online, where I was Chief Creative Officer and Senior VP of AOL Studios, and we made and managed original content for AOL, which also had lots of other content partners along with this internal studio. After I left AOL, I did a startup, which I sold to American Greetings in Cleveland. So I was president and chief creative officer of AmericanGreetings.com until 2005, when I decided I was going to get away from corporate life and started to get involved with producing Broadway shows. I did that for about 10 years and decided that was the suckiest job on the face of the earth. And but I didn't know what else to do, and nobody was hiring, ex-CEOs who hadn't been relevant for 10 years. So I did the only thing I could do, which was I started writing. And I wrote about everything that I had done at, Disney and in theater and in social media and, the prototypical internet, movies. And I got nothing but crickets. No one really gave a damn about what I thought about those topics. And then at the suggestion of a friend, I think Oculus had just been on the cover of, Time magazine. I did a sort of researchy article, like way too long, like a 1,500 word article on Medium, and it got like 20,000 hits in 12 hours, which was more than all the other posts put together. So, it's like a dopamine hit, right? It's like having a spike in your podcast.
Yep.
So, repeat. And the more I repeated, the more traffic I started to get. And somehow, unlike in other categories, my voice was welcomed in XR. And, an old colleague, somebody who'd actually worked for a colleague of mine, actually, saw my work and called me up and hired me to join the Forbes tech team. And, Forbes is, a very powerful brand.
Yeah.
And it opens a lot of doors, and it confers upon people with whom it's associated a tremendous amount of legitimacy.
Mm-hmm.
So that was probably premature in my case, but I found people like Ori Inbar and AWE and other like-minded people, and got educated very fast. So, expertise is like, how fast can you learn about a topic?
Yeah.
So I haven't stopped in 5 years, so I guess that's pretty good.
Well, it's interesting because one of the beautiful things about getting into virtual reality technology, and especially at this young version of technology, it's come around in cycles, right? There's the sort of Damocles, and we've gone through the 80s waves, but right now it's such a flat landscape, and it's growing. But like, to get in, you can very quickly become a thought leader in the space by just finding cool stuff and reporting on it, and that dopamine hit cycle of because that's what, like, a lot of people that are into VR technology, they want to know about the latest and greatest, like what's coming up. What's
well, sure, because we haven't settled on a paradigm yet.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and they're trying to figure out. They're trying to understand it. It's like trying to build a plane on the way down. So it's like, I mean, what?
Yeah. Well, like, everybody doing something new, and anything creative, has that problem. Whether you're making a movie or building a VR experience, you're going to finish it in a mad rush, because anything of quality, you're trying to stuff every ounce of energy, every drop of sweat that you've got in you to make that project everything that you think it can be.
Yeah. So what are the main areas of virtual reality and XR technology that really excites you? What are the areas about that you look forward to? I mean, you've been 5 years in the space researching it. And for anybody that's listening, if you have questions to Charlie about any of this stuff, please feel free to put in the comments, and we'll answer it. So, but Charlie, I'd love to learn.
Well, I would say for a long while, I was more focused on mobile AR than anything else, because everyone has a smartphone in their hand, and Snap was, exploding in terms of the amount of AR that people were doing. And then Pokemon Go, of course, is one of the most successful creative franchises of all time. They're like $5 billion and counting. They're right up there with Grand Theft Auto, as the greatest, single franchises in entertainment history.
Yeah.
That includes all of the Star Wars movies and everything else. That's how powerful games are right now. So I was very focused on AR, and I still am. The problem is it's the form factor is not there to support it. Right?
Yeah.
You're just, unless you're, a teenager and you got time on your hands, and God knows there are hundreds of millions of them. So I don't say that in a way. I wish I was one of them. I would make very creative things. And that's booming. So, I leaned into that. And, the problem with VR prior to the Quest launching was it was for prosumers. Getting a PC set up hard, not easy. You had the external light towers. I mean, they could not have made it. They could not have introduced more friction. No customer service. I mean, it just was not for regular consumers. If I had been a regular consumer, I would have put it all back in a box along with a $1,500 computer and marched it right back into Best Buy like an unwanted pet.
Yeah.
So I was down. I was down on that. I
Uh-huh.
liked it. I liked it for enterprise. I have always liked it for enterprise. I think VR is a training and simulation machine, and I have
Mhm.
always thought that about VR.
Mhm.
Now the entertainment part of VR is coming on strong. Now that an installed base, now that there are, the game engines are established production technologies. So VR has come a very long way in the past 2 years,
Mhm.
and we are nearing an inflection point where, listen, when you get like 25 million of these things, and the next
Mhm.
year it doubles, that's an inflection point, right? Where you go from 25 million to 75 million. Like everybody
How
suddenly has
how
one.
many how many headsets do you think are out right now?
10 million
10,000,000?
between PlayStation VR and
Uh-huh.
the Quest.
So
Probably, I would say 3 to 5 of the Quest and
mhm,
7 to 10 of the PlayStation. Neither of them reports on the
got it.
category directly, but Facebook, it's easy enough to guess since they
Mhm.
don't have much in the other category.
Yeah, yeah, it's all or nothing for them. And then you feel like the rate the adoption of the VR headsets are, is it you think is it doubling every year? You think that's a
Yes. I did.
yeah?
Well, did it double? Yeah, it probably doubled. Easy to double when you have 5 million.
Mhm.
Right. When you get to 25 million,
Yeah.
it's hard to double. But I mean, I think that's the way these things go, right? It's like, how does it happen? Really, really slowly, and then all of a
Mhm.
sudden.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, do you have any doubt that that's the way it will be in 5 years? So we're only really talking about the pace of adoption.
Yeah,
But
it's
with
coming.
$300 headsets out there, I just don't see the pace. Everybody who has a game console will buy one.
Yeah.
If you don't have a games console, you'll be mezzo. Maybe you don't need to. And listen, it still hasn't arrived. It's in a process of becoming. Everything about it could be better. It
Mhm.
could be lighter. It could be cooler. It could, it could have better sensors. It could have a longer battery. I mean, the list goes on. The head strap is stinky. I mean, the thing is, when you make a $300 VR headset that is good quality, a lot of other things are cheaped out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's you're focusing on what really matters, and if you want those peripheral, anytime
Yes,
you make an emerging technology, there's all these peripherals. Like the iPhone came out, it wasn't originally waterproof, and so they built
right,
cases and all.
exactly. You have to pick your battles, so to speak.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and keep in mind, of course, these are devices that have to do everything. It has to do education, it has to do training, it has to do 360 video, it has to do shooting, and it has to do exercise. I mean, it's a big Swiss Army knife, and it is hard to make a Swiss Army knife. That's why I've always liked it for enterprise and military use, because it just has to do one thing. It doesn't have to do one thing right now and four other things later in the day.
Mhm.
So, I
Yeah.
think that is hard. I also think we need to say, as questionable as Facebook is as a business, and there are a lot of reasons for that that have nothing to do with Facebook, the company, and whether they've tried to be transparent or greedy or whatever. I mean, the law of unintended consequences has overtaken social media.
Yeah.
And so because of those unintended consequences, things have to be done. Will
Mhm.
they be done? I have no idea, no prediction, but clearly things should be done, because it is creating far more problems than it is solving. People have First Amendment rights, but they don't have the First Amendment right to scream fire in a theater. So unless we can get a hold of that, it's going to create problems that will make it more difficult to make money, which is what I'm against.
Yeah.
If you're a capitalist, you have to be against kind of ridiculous instability.
Yeah. Well, how do you think those effects are going to translate into the virtual world, into virtual social reality? Because there's things like the social dilemma.
I think the pandemic, all of it is going to drive us deeper into VR.
Yeah. It's probably the only COVID-free industry that's out
It's
there.
not just, yeah, it is COVID, but it's also that people value experiences today. They
Mhm.
don't, things and material things don't have as much value. Partly because people can't afford them, and partly
Mhm.
because people have come to realize how useless they are. and how burdensome they are. You know, books and records, which used to weigh a man down as he grew through life, you know, are really just uh, easily converted into atoms. I mean, into bits, right? So
Mhm.
we're entering the age where bits like NFTs are starting to have as much value as things that are made out of atoms.
Yeah. Well, it's data, right? It's like it's an easier way to carry the data. You know, you used to do it on like a big brick or an old computer. And
Yes,
now, you
that's
know,
true.
as
No,
Steve Jobs
that's
said,
true. Right.
the
Well,
thousands.
and hard to duplicate the original in that circumstances. Instant to do it in VR, which is why, of course, people are trying to attach a specific blockchain to a specific item, which I think is going to be ultimately very good for big brands. So that
Mhm.
if you have a Louis Vuitton in VR, it's either authentic or it's not.
See, that's interesting because I mean, you're talking about those NFTs, the NTFs,
Non-fungible tokens.
non-fungible tokens, yeah, where people are trying to attach it, and it seems like when people go into the VR space, they're like, "Oh, how do I monetize this?" Right? And they're like, "Blockchain. I'm going to go into marijuana,
No, I mean,
medical."
the way there are a couple ways that people are going to be monetizing VR. I mean,
Hmm.
one of them is creating great content.
That's
Um,
you might talk
you
about the
know,
Quest store.
pardon me?
Are you talking about like the Quest store, like getting into like one
No,
of the
it's the
stores, or?
Quest and PlayStation and Steam. I think are all committed to an open web where you can buy software and run it on your system anywhere. So I think sort of PlayStation VR and Quest are probably going to be for now the leading brands of headsets. But
Mhm.
Apple one will come along. How is it going to play with the other ones? Well, we really don't know yet. So we'll have to see. I mean, it's exciting. Apple's clearly got more than one headset
Uh,
coming to market. Timing unknown. It sounds
yeah,
like the VR headset will be first. The
yeah.
drums are beating more loudly. I'm not quite sure what will be on the VR headset, but of this, I am quite positive. Whatever Apple introduces, they will introduce it when it can do some kind of telepresence.
Mm,
It's going to have one killer app, and that one killer app is going to be connecting people to other people.
mhm.
I'm not sure how they're going to do it. There are a bunch of different methods, but I promise you that is going to be the killer app on the machine, in the same way Messenger was on the iPhone.
I heard
And,
that.
the camera ultimately was on the iPhone, right?
Yeah.
So VR really is it's sort of like that moment when the camera, met the phone and everything
Mm.
changed.
Yeah. Well, and I did know that from what I heard is that the company Spaces that was originally a
Yes.
location-based
Yeah.
entertainment, they then, the pandemic hit and they pivoted and then they
Yes.
went in and all of a sudden they started plugging VR into every type of Zoom, Skype thing that they could. And then I heard that Apple acquired them.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so I'm
all of that is true. I think, as you're suggesting, it was largely an acqui-hire. They
mm,
were ex DreamWorks. They were good engineers. They did a good job in location-based entertainment, but in a way, they were kind of wasted on location-based entertainment, and they pivoted in a smart and aggressive way,
mm,
and did a sprint to create the thing they knew everybody would need, which was a way to connect with other people and work with other people in VR. And
mm,
they did two things that were very smart. The first is they made it web based. So, so that
mm,
meant that you could be inside of um, a Zoom chat while
mm,
you in VR could spawn windows around you and do a presentation. So, that idea that some people could be in VR and some people can be in a 2D world and yet they're together in a virtual space is very compelling. And
mm,
so, I think it, my guess is that Apple took one look at these guys and said, I'm not sure that they saw something in the software as much as they saw something in the thinking and the
mm.
quality of the engineers. And I don't know what they bought them for. They had obviously already raised a bunch of money. So I don't know, $50 million for a company that had taken 20 and was on the brink of bankruptcy. I think that's a pretty good
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah.
And hopefully those guys will be able to implement those ideas or work with the ones Apple has. But I do agree, it shows that they're leaning into this idea of a virtual connection.
Which is the one thing I'm looking at, because I don't know if you've been to the Oculus Connects before. If you go to them, there's like Facebook Connect and
Well,
Oculus
there's no
Connect.
reason for me to go to them because number one, I'm not an engineer, and number two, everything of value as a demo comes to me, or I can watch the live stream. But I will tell you flat out, and everybody who goes to Connect knows I'm telling the truth. These are highly technical conversations.
They are. They're fun.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, Charlie gets me go.
Yeah.
My eyes glaze over. I mean, once they start they're talking about, well, we put a collider on this and then we did that. I'm like, I mean, I stopped taking notes. I don't even know those words.
So your interest is use-based business applications, things that are innovative, that really drive not only just the whole industry forward, but like,
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in strategy. I'm interested
Mm.
in human factors. Yes, very interested in business applications, but business applications are harder for me to study than consumer.
Yeah.
Um,
What do
Right.
you
So I
think?
do what I can on the business side, but I learn from companies that hire me as a consultant to do something else more often than not. But I have gone to a lot of business oriented VR conferences because they're really, until the Quest and the PlayStation started to pick up, wasn't a whole lot else to talk about.
Yeah, what do you think?
But I do think this principle that you've got a pyramid with
Uh-huh.
university research and the military at the top of it, and then the technology filters down through retail
Yeah.
and prosumers, and ultimately comes out in its most reduced and basic form at a consumer accessible price, and then subsequent iterations start to make it more and more powerful. That's what we saw with computers, that's what we see with smartphones, and that is what appears to be happening with, I mean, it is happening
Yeah.
with immersive media. That's why I keep saying I think VR is following the development pattern of the personal computer, which took, depending on how you time it, 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
So, if it's 2012, you want to call the incorporation of Oculus the, beginning of the timeline, just arbitrarily. Well, that means we're, still, another 18 months into year 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're pretty much on time, to be perfectly honest. And that's actually pretty fast considering that there is no R in VR and you have to put it on your head, which, most people think is weird.
Yeah. Well, you think it's weird and you think it looks silly until you try it, and then your mind's blown, right?
Yes, but people don't like other people watching them when they can't see them.
This is true.
And so, yeah, they can do it alone, but you have to overcome, just the fact that it's so new. There'll be resistance. Anything new of value has been resisted, to the death by many people.
Yeah.
So,
well, there's a buildup of it until it overtops, and then it feels like your FOMO outside the party thing going on.
Yes. Well, FOMO is a big part of it that always drives things that are new, like websites. Right? It's like, oh my God, if I don't have a website for my business, I can't compete.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder if that's the same thing. I wonder if Apple's feeling any of the FOMO, because right now I heard an amazing stat that Oculus said, I was watching the GDC talks, that 1 in 3 apps did over $1 million in the Quest store. There's like 60 apps. So that's like,
yeah, I mean, I don't think that's so much in the world of video games with you. I think it's impressive for Oculus. It shows that people are going to be out of content. Even if they have access to tons of free stuff, they're going to be buying a lot of content.
Do you think Apple will be able to come out with a gaming space that would challenge like Oculus's Quest store?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't, Apple, there just isn't that much information out there. I don't follow the games industry. I think if Apple silos off their device, it will be a big mistake.
Oh, you mean if Apple silos off the device? So if you mean if it's only works for Apple, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean you know can't download from other platforms. You know, so you could sort of, is it really be like the Google Play versus Apple?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the iTunes store. I mean, is that where we're headed here?
Well, yeah, it's like it does the old tricks new and work in a new space, and
I hope not. I think 5G will make a big difference because in most cases you won't need an app.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really impressive. I have heard of people being able to stream some of the VR experiences, but you're trying to get that like sub 10 millisecond latency thing.
You know, Qualcomm has a reference design where it offloads a lot of the work onto the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
So it does this kind of dual processing that eliminates latency and increases performance dramatically.
And they probably integrated their new chipsets, and then they're working with 5G, and so it's all there. So that's again one of those quantum jumps when you actually can pull from the power of the internet, because right now you have to do a lot of things local, or you've got to optimize the crud out of a lot of stuff, and so especially
exactly. Well, I think 5G will really impact the strategies that people are using.
Do you have a guess on the timeline for the 5G and that kind of that rollout stuff?
Oh God, I've been having this fight with people for 3 years. These are public companies investing billions of dollars. Of course, they're overhyping it.
Yeah.
You know, as it turns out, it's hard to install 5G. You know, there are several flavors of it, and the fastest 5G still has technical problems. The other, gosh, what's it called? The other kind is more effective, but again, the repeaters, you know, you kind of have to install new repeaters. So wherever 4G is, now there has to be 5G. So it's going to take a while. I mean, it's sort of like the move from 3G to 4G. As I recall, that took 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, in some places you went and you just got nothing, right? So I think it's probably going to look more like that. And again, when was year one? I don't know, probably last year. So, you know, within 5 years. But again, you know, when you get to be a geezer like I am, 5 years just doesn't sound like that long to me. Yeah. But yeah, by the time buy a 5G phone, it will have been around for 5 years.
Yeah, and on that note, because what you're talking about is there's different gaps that when you fill that gap, then you don't care because how long it took, because now it's here. And right. So like the 5G, like it's only painful because we're not we don't have it yet. But once we have it, it's like, oh, it's old news. What's next? What do you think are the missing pieces from like virtual reality and collaboration and future of work stuff that's needed to really kind of have this take off to the next level?
Well, again, I don't think we've arrived at a paradigm yet, right? So what I mean by a paradigm is there's no kind of terminal functionality that everybody has to have the way you have in a phone, where you have to have certain sensors. And, you know, there's a lot of ways, like there's, so you know, the standardization, you know, no matter who's making a Android phone, right? They all basically do the same thing. It's slightly different, cheaper components, slightly different approaches to different subtle things about, you know what the phone is going to do best. But for VR and AR, we don't have that standardization yet.
So the wild west with this stuff.
So let me give you an example. We were talking about telepresence before, because telepresence is at the center of all this, right? Trying to work with, socialize with people who are distant from you as if they were physically present, right? One way to do that is in VR. The problem with that is, you know, you don't have eye contact. You can stimulate body motion and blinking and gestures. You know, that we have AI that does that, but you still can't make eye contact with somebody. And let's also remember, there is no R in VR. We should have called it replaced reality instead of virtual reality, because so many people go in and they're like, I'm in a video game. I don't want to be in a video game. I thought it was virtual reality.
So you say that the reality has to be hyper real in order for it to be reality.
No, I say it just look kind of more real than a video game. I know, I don't think it has to be real. I think it has to be more real than a video game. Not like Facebook Horizon, which is obviously a cartoon.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Is being in a video game going to be okay for some people? Yeah, for half the people, for 175 million people, it'll be just fine. Mm-hmm. For the other 175,000 people, they'll participate on a 2D screen.
Yeah, well, you're crossing that chasm into making avatars that look real without it looking creepy, like you're trying to trick me. You know, that's the challenge, because Toon, you're like, okay, Toon, you're not trying to trick me.
But also, I think here's the thing, okay? It's only Uncanny Valley if it isn't right.
Yeah.
So the reason we have Uncanny Valley, like Spatial, has these great avatars that everybody loves because they're wrapped around a model based on your social media picture. So, everybody gets this, oh my God, oh wow, it's really Dylan when you go in. But then after you spend an hour or two there, you say, wow, Dylan's mouth is moving in a weird way and he's not really fully there. It is kind of creepy and it's kind of distracting.
Yeah.
And they actually are working on a system where, once you've been in there 1 or 2 or 3 times, it starts to give you other avatar options.
Got it.
So you don't have to look like a ghoul and make people be just because your Facebook or profile picture doesn't happen to wrap around that well.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that even in Hollywood, you look at they try to make like a young Jeff Bridges, or they try to make a young, and you see them, you're like, your mind's like, that's not right, and they have they have the power of VFX studios being able to do that.
Well, again, I agree with you. Well, that's, first of all, Robert De Niro with the young man's face walking around like an old man is creepy as fuck. Then people were talking about how great that was. I'm like, that is icky.
Yeah, you're like, you have a stranger danger vibe that goes on with that you're like, I don't.
Well, the other thing is because in a lot of scenes they hide his face when he's supposed to be young. So in a lot of those scenes, he isn't even, actually a special effect. It's him, but they framed the scene in a way that it doesn't give away his face.
It's the Japanese anime move where they talk like this so they don't have to track it. They just hide the features. So what are your thoughts? Have you looked into there's the Zuckerberg made an announcement they're supposedly working on the Quest 3 and the Quest 4, and they're supposed to be like mouth tracking and other things. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, as I said, thank God for Mark Zuckerberg and Oculus, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. Mm-hmm. They've got supposedly 20% of their engineers are now working on XR. So
really,
I think that's great.
20%.
Yeah, so for all the problems I think they have in their core business, Instagram doesn't have those problems. So I think Facebook will be fine, whatever happens with social media, if it's regulated or whatever, they're going to be just fine. AT&T was broken up and now they're one of the biggest companies in the world, and they spun off the companies that made the internet. So, I don't think that some regulation on Facebook or taking YouTube out of Google would be terrible things for any of the companies involved. And I think it probably would be net positive for shareholders, just as AT&T was, even though, Wall Street and conservatives railed against it at the end of American capitalism. It was the beginning of the most voracious period of American capitalism in history. So much for that.
Well, right now it's a virtual land grab. We did it from the U.S. and, we started on the East Coast and we went across and we literally grabbed land. And, then we did it onto the internet space where we started grabbing lands and .coms and I own Disney.com or whatever that might be. And then, now it's the virtual space where, I'm shocked that 20% of all engineers from Facebook are on.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
I'm shocked that 20% of engineers are on there, but it does make sense because they really are trying to create that next Facebook horizon to dominate the space because it is a land grab.
Yeah, keenly. I mean, right now it looks like it'll be a duopoly, but there are a lot of other players who could emerge with a product the way Samsung emerged, 10 years ago and sort of became this, so, and all those companies are working on headsets of varying kinds.
When you say duopoly, you're talking about Apple and Facebook? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. And you have a little company called Sony.
Yes. Yeah. That small company. Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot of poker yet to be played. Mm-hmm. So that's why I say we haven't settled on a paradigm. So those guys who are off buying up Somnimum space must have made a lot of money off of Bitcoin, because why do they think the paradigm is going to settle on Somnimum space or Second Life?
Yeah.
I mean, I think they ought to be looking at Fortnite and Rec Room and VR chat as possible, or Altspace, which is owned by Microsoft and has infinite scalability. Yeah. So I just don't. I highly skeptical of those things. Although I know smart people who have bought some land in Somnimum space. I just I'm going to keep my powder dry. I'll pay a premium later with the rest of the skeptics.
Yeah. Well, it seems to be kind of what, if you look at Facebook's buying strategy, originally they were funding companies up front and early to, hey, make cool stuff because that. But now what they're doing is they're waiting until you're successful and then they're buying you up. Like they bought Beat Saber and they pull you off of all of the channels, and so they're like,
I won't be surprised when they buy Rec Room.
Yeah, you think that's the next move? They're going to go for Rec Room. I mean,
I don't know whether it's Rec Room, but it'll be something. I mean, at some point they've got to stop trying to build their own social media platform. They're trying on Horizons. Horizons it's got great things about it, but it's all about user generated content and user content tools, and they're just not going to catch up to Altspace, Rec Room, and VR chat. So, and they could end up buying any of those.
Yeah, I think
and by the way, so could Google and so could Amazon. So there are lots of companies that are in the mix that want to be players. You've got Samsung is certainly one that again, I'm waiting for Samsung to work its magic on XR the way they did on smartphones.
Yeah. And right now Samsung and Sony, they don't have a digital playground. The same thing that Microsoft has Altspace. Facebook has Horizons. There's people trying, and then
Samsung does not have any software plays.
Interesting.
But Samsung has tons of cash, as does Zoom, by the way, and it's very possible Zoom will buy a VR conferencing platform of some kind.
Oh, I could see that. Just
maybe Verbella. Who knows? Somebody's going to buy Verbella.
And that's all the low hanging fruits. Everyone's trying to basically extend their brands into this virtual landscape.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I can see Zoom doing something. Zoom is sitting on $4 billion of cash that they say they're going to use for acquisitions. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't be surprised.
That makes. I mean,
Rec Room and VR chat are entertainment oriented and skew young.
Yeah. Well, right now, what's interesting about that is that Rec Room just started to pay out cash to top performers that have a lot of subscribers.
Well, they also just raised and announced yesterday that they had raised $100 million at $1.3 billion valuation.
I thought they just did a Series A. So is that a Series B that they did? Is that the Rec Room?
I think it may be a Series C.
Whoa! I didn't know about that. That's interesting.
I don't know what the end game is because their revenue numbers and their valuation are not aligned.
It's a number. It's like the same reason why Facebook bought Instagram. They bought it because of the users and the email.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, obviously that's the way they're feeling about their values. So.
Wow. What? Let me ask you this. Just shifting gears a little bit because I know you have to go in just a couple of minutes here. You also teach XR at Chapman University. That's correct?
Yes, and I also teach at VR major program at Shenandoah University. which is in suburban DC.
Got it. What advice do you give to people that like, so maybe I'm a young kid and I just found this VR technology. Like what's the crash course you give to these young ones if they want to kind of go?
Listen, if you just follow the Unity education courses, you need a gaming PC, you need a gigabyte hard drive. And then you just start taking their tutorial courses. I mean, I love teaching Unity because I don't have to do anything. It's all in the tutorial courses. Unity teaches Unity way better than I'm ever going to do it. They're way less confusing and confused than I am, yet the students need to find this material and they need to be able to execute it. If you can learn Unity or teach yourself Unity as using these courses and Discord and all the other tools available, if you can do that, you can have a six-figure job. I tell my students all the time, do 10 hours a week of Unity for 6 months, and then go get yourself a job for $100,000.
It is the quickest bang for the buck in terms of stepping into the industry and the cross-platform.
And the other thing I tell them is, it's nice that you have a degree from Chapman, but nobody needs to hire a degree from Chapman. Mm-hmm. What you need are skills. Yeah. And when you have skills, you've changed the relationship in the interview, because suddenly, you're interviewing them. Mm-hmm. And, then you can say, I'm humble, I'm young, I'm hungry to learn. You the company, you figure out what everybody's job is, and then you use the things you've learned at Chapman to get yourself out of some stupid programming job and into executive work in the company. Yeah.
And it's interesting because the building with Unity and it's one of those engines that is it somehow became just the leader. It's that and Unreal. And a couple of years ago I heard that Unity considered themselves a startup, but I think they're going. Aren't they going?
Well, they are public. They went public about 6 months ago, and they're doing quite well considering they've never had a profitable quarter. Certainly suggests the valuation for Unreal, which is also having huge success with its game engine, and also Fortnite at the moment, means its valuation should be,
Mine's the whole Apple fiasco.
Probably in excess of $100 billion.
Yeah, when Apple cut Fortnite out of there, out of the App Store, and then they started to go for cutting out all of the Unreal Engine in the Apple Store. I don't think that actually went through. But that's terrifying to have that much power over a content creation engine.
That's why 5G at the end of the App Store is something everybody is rooting for.
Oh, because then they can just bypass it. You log into just some website and they kick out the data.
Yeah.
Oh. So you think that's going to be the end of the app stores once they start to do that, unless they have some sort of
I would never the end of the app stores or the democratization of the app stores. So the app stores could no longer charge 30% because people would have an option as to where to buy it.
Wow, that's super interesting.
So I think that we're headed for that, but again, I think I don't want to overpromise on the hype of 5G when we could be looking at 2025 before any of the things that I'm talking about start to happen. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I was happy about with the announcements that Facebook was making really wasn't announcements; they were just kind of revealing the direction of their research in the hope that people would to gain trust, basically. Mm-hmm. And to attract other researchers. Mm-hmm. I thought the things they were working on were necessary components for invisible computing. You need AI. You need an interface. I always thought it was going to be a ring or a watch, but this idea that it's a bracelet that's reading commands from your brain and swipe, and you could develop a system like we could have invisible computing. Those are the elements that are required. I was thinking of a more mechanical system, but clearly they've had some breakthroughs that may enable something much more truly invisible.
So then they literally have the wristband, and they're tanding it up with the AR headset so that you can think the word click or swipe, and then it automatically does that. Is that what you're?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Did you see anything? I know you got to go in just a hot second here, but did you see anything with I forget her name, Mary Lou, who was the head of ex-Facebook researcher? She was. I saw an old article a while ago where they put a bunch of cameras inside the headset at Facebook Reality Labs, and then you put it on. And it's a functional MRI machine.
Yeah. Oh, how interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think again, when we talk about the paradigm not being settled, I mean, there's going to be 12 sensors in the next generation headset. Maybe some of those sensors are going to be used for facial recognition.
Yeah, it's incredible to see what's coming on the pipes. I know you have to go in 2 minutes because just had a hard stop. Is there anything last you'd like to let the people know about before you can tell them how they can find more of your work and what you do?
Well, the way to find my work is through my Twitter feed at Charlie Fink or on charliefink.com. Also, look for me on Fridays, This Week in XR podcast with Paramount futurist Ted Schilowitz. That comes out mid to late afternoon on Fridays. Ted and I hash over the week's tech news with lots of editorial, spirited banter, and wonderful guests. So that's the This Week in XR podcast. And of course, that's the title of my weekly column in Forbes. And it's been quite a week with Rec Room doing a big raise and other things. I'll also give a plug for something I wrote about today in Forbes, Adventure Labs, Dr. Crumb's School for Disobedient Pets. Grab 8 friends. So it's like $15 each and do a session. Highly recommended. It's on the Quest. It is awesome. AdventureLab.fun.
AdventureLabs.fun. I'll check it out. I glimpsed at it earlier looking through it, and it looks like just shenanigans.
The inside of a cartoon.
Yes, it was beautifully done. Beautiful. Thank you, Charlie. I really appreciate your time. Have a wonderful day. Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely, brother. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon.